All right. Good afternoon or good morning to folks who are on the West Coast. Welcome to our next installment of the Adaptation Co-Creation Series. In Webinar 4, we'll be talking about climate leadership and the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures journey. This webinar is hosted by WSP and Microsoft and supported by the American Society of Adaptation Professionals. Recently, major investors have requested that companies they invest in align with the TCFD recommendations and begin to disclose more decision-useful data, information, and progress towards reducing their GHG emissions, advancing sustainability actions, and managing climate-related risks and opportunities. Today's panelists will share insights from their TCFD journey to date, the lessons they've learned over time, and actions they plan to take to further their corporate climate leadership. Just a couple of tech checks as we get going today. We're going to ask for your microphones to be turned off. You can have your cameras turned off or on. And as you have questions, please go ahead and post those in the chat. I'm Beth Gibbons. I'm the Executive Director at the American Society of Adaptation Professionals. I'll be one of your co-facilitators today, and I'm joined by Brianna Nels, who's handling our tech. So if you have any questions, feel free to tag either Brianna or myself in the chat. Just to get us going a little bit about who is the American Society of Adaptation Professionals. Well, we connect and support climate change adaptation and resilience professionals to advance innovation and excellence in the field of adaptation. We believe that climate change is a real and serious danger to all sectors and systems, and that adaptation and resilience build stronger, more prepared communities, ecosystems, and economies, and that equity and environmental justice must be centered in all the work that adaptation professionals do. ASAP members across North America are building essential climate resilience, and the ASAP network keeps them connected, sharing, learning, and adapting. The strength of the ASAP network is its sectoral and regional diversity, and ASAP members are across the United States, Canada, and 5 other countries around the globe. Our network is almost evenly split between folks working in the public sector, for-profit companies, nonprofit organizations, and academia. And we have over 700 members and 24 organizational members, all contributing to the strength and the knowledge sharing that makes our work possible. ASAP runs programs to address 4 capacity building outcomes, and we have an applied research program to help communities prepare to receive climate migrants. This program falls into our ASAP Connects program, which is all about bringing people together to share information and resources so they can connect across their professional work. Well, ASAP focuses on bringing members together in its Connects program, sharing those accomplishments in our Voices program, and building careers through our ASAP Careers program. In the last quarter alone, we've convened over 100 professionals on the topic of climate-informed demography. We've hosted 2 sessions between ASAP members and congressional staff to identify key priorities for the 117th Congress. And we've hosted a network-wide virtual event, which was hailed as one of the best opportunities members experienced in 2020 to connect with one another, share their values in ways that they want to accelerate the field together. Today, you're joining us for our co-creation series, and what you can expect is to hear about innovative and effective adaptation practices. You'll hear from diverse project teams, and you'll be getting a conversation on justice and equity woven throughout. Our past webinars in this series have discussed reducing flooding through updated design and code standards, innovations in adaptation finance, and practicing racial and environmental justice and climate adaptation. I welcome you to learn more about this series and ways that you can get involved on our website at adaptationprofessionals.org/adaptation co-creation series. Of course, ASAP's work is made possible through the funding we receive from membership dues, including dues from individuals and organizations. Organizations which join ASAP extend the benefits of ASAP membership to their staff, clients, and colleagues, and ensure that they have a hand in building the adaptation field and benefiting from resources and knowledge that come from ASAP membership. WSP's leadership in climate adaptation, resilience, and sustainability is well known, and it can be especially seen in its newly launched Climate Response, Sustainability, and Resilience business lines. which combines sustainability, resilience, emergency response, design engineering services for vertical, horizontal, energy and water infrastructure to ensure that WSP's clients are truly future ready. Not only is WSP a leader in corporate and government climate services, they also walk the walk. They were named the most sustainable company in the engineering industry in 2019 and 2020 by the World Finance magazine. And in 2019, they became a signatory to the United Nations Global Compact. They became the first professional services firm to sign sustainability-linked credit terms in the Americas and continue their internal efforts to fully integrate and align with TCFD, an effort which Emily Wasley is leading for WSP globally. And as of last week, WSP reaffirmed its position as a transformative leader in the field by becoming ASAP's first organizational member and contributing at the transform level. This level of engagement illustrates WSP's continued commitment to supporting adaptation professionals in the adaptation field, while guaranteeing that WSP staff and clients stay in the cutting edge of adaptation and resilience. So it is with this level of leadership and commitment that we know that WSP is going to lead us into a conversation today on corporate climate leadership. And Emily Wasley will be our moderator and host for the rest of today's session. So with that, Emily, I'm happy to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Beth. It's really great to be here with you all today. As an adaptation professional and ASAP member, I also serve as president-elect of the ASAP Board of Directors. I'm really excited for you all to hear from some really fundamental and awesome climate leaders across the corporate world. And through my role as practice leader for corporate climate risk adaptation and resilience at WSP, I do get the privilege to support a variety of different climate leaders across publicly traded and privately held companies. So you'll hear from three folks today and about their journeys and how they've gotten to where they are today and what they have been doing truly on the ground to advance climate action as it relates to climate risk and resilience on the ground. So some of you may not be as familiar with TCFD. So what I'm going to try to do is give a brief overview of TCFD before we kick this off. And since Beth gave such a great overview of WSP, I will skip that part. But if you want to learn more about us, just Google WSP and you can find us online. So let me share my screen. Okay. And Beth, just help me out here. Can you see my?
We're seeing your, I think we're seeing your presenter view right now, or maybe you just have to go to present.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
I'll take it from the beginning. We are seeing your presenter view though, not your full slides. There we go.
Okay. All right. So, so again, a little bit of background on the task force and climate-related financial disclosures, and then we'll get into the discussions with Ken, Jamie, and Chris, have a little bit of dialogue and reflection from Paul, and then answer any questions that you all have. So please tee those up in the Q&A box, and we look forward to answering those questions. All right, so a little bit of background on the task force and climate-related financial disclosures, or as we call it, TCFD. It doesn't really roll off the tongue so easily, so the acronym's a lot easier to use. And you know, there are a couple different drivers that have been driving the importance of climate-related financial disclosures globally. One of which is we've been seeing an uptick in the extreme weather events that we've been facing across the world. And there is growing recognition from investors, from the financial sector, from everyone around the world that climate change is truly having a physical impact on our communities, on our businesses, on our operations, on our supply chains. And there needs to be some action taken to manage those and minimize those impacts. Another component is investor drivers. So companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street have recently and pretty pronouncedly encouraged their investees to align with and implement the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And before TCFD, there really wasn't a consistent or comparable framework out there on forward-looking at climate projections and incorporating those results of climate scenarios into decision-making for addressing the physical implications of climate change and how to transition to a more just low-carbon economy. So TCFD was a significant driver by investors to make something that is more comparable and clear and consistent for public disclosures on climate-related risks and opportunities. Regulatory drivers, I mean, leading up to Paris 2015, a lot of businesses and investors were very vocal about the need to have some regulatory changes that would move us to a more accelerated rate of transitioning from the traditional fossil fuels to more renewable and clean energy. We're seeing now in the UK and Canada, other countries across the world are starting to mandate that governments and companies disclose and align with the TCFD recommendations. And anyone who's ever heard me talk about climate-related risks, there are always opportunities to create a more sustainable and resilient future. So it's not taking advantage of the climate, it is absolutely providing a new market for sustainable products, for sustainable pipelines, for sustainable markets, and resilience, true resilience for our world and our communities that really need it the most. So those are a couple of different drivers. When it comes to corporate frameworks, principles, and standards, there is a full plethora of items to choose from and to align with. And so here's just a quick snapshot that I find helpful to get a better understanding of what are considered principles. So principles could be the principles for responsible investment or the sustainable development goals that a lot of companies do align with and are signatories of. And then you have the reporting frameworks, which is where TCFD sits. There are also some ESG materiality standards, and those are in line with the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, SASB, and IR. Those three have committed to combining forces, which is great because that means that there's going to be one entity. And apologies for my dog who has decided that now is the time to squeak his toys. But they're going to combine forces so that there's less work and resources needed on the corporate side to really take action on climate change on the ground. And then there are a variety of different rating agencies, and they look at the disclosures that are being released publicly. They rate different companies, they rate different cities on how they're taking action on climate change and how they're progressing throughout that process. So it's no big news to all of us, but climate change does present a financial risk to the global economy. And there are significant benefits of improved disclosure. And what TCFD really drives towards is more decision useful disclosure. So not more data, not more information, it's more decision useful. So it's driven with a purpose and with an outcome and with a sense of how are we progressing on managing these risks and maximizing the opportunities, and how are we doing that in a way that's collaborative. So there are multiple benefits of better disclosure, including more effective risk assessments. So we're seeing that companies are now looking at the chronic systemic issues that could be facing their company across environmental, social, and governance issues, and especially related to climate change. There's improved capital allocation, where you're going to invest, what you're going to invest in, when you're going to invest, and then it helps with strategic planning. So it really is a force to bring together folks that don't traditionally work together to the table to really discuss how they're going to address these chronic issues and these acute shocks. All right, so this is a quick snapshot of what is the TCFD 101. So we've already gone through what the acronym stands for. It was formed in 2015 by the G20's Financial Stability Board. It's co-chaired by Mark Carney, who is the previous lead for the Bank of England, and by former Mayor Michael Bloomberg. There are 32 members, and those members include investors, disclosure preparers and rating agencies. The real driver, as I mentioned, was to provide a framework that informs the investors of what climate risks what are the climate risks to their investees, both on the physical implication side, so physical meaning acute shocks like extreme weather events, but also the chronic changes in the climate like higher temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and sea level rise. The TCFD does have 9 principles that they adhere to, and they're listed right here in the middle box. They're relevant, specific, complete, etc. And again, it's really looking at forward-looking information, incorporating those future climate projections into their decision-making measures and their processes and policies to hopefully make that transition shift to really looking at climate change in a new lens and a new perspective. The TCFD produced a final recommendations report in 2017. You can view that online. And as I mentioned, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street have all publicly expressed and encouraged their investees to align with and implement the TCFD recommendations. So really quickly, these are the 4 core elements. They're governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. I'm going to move us quickly on to the 11 recommended disclosures, and these are listed here. And they really go across the gamut. So looking at governance from how involved is the board on addressing and understanding climate-related risks and opportunities, to the company, to the supply chain, as well as what's the management structure that's in place to make sure that things are taking place and things are being managed effectively and proactively. From the strategy perspective, some of you may think that strategy should come after risk management, but this is looking at the resilience of a company's strategy. So how resilient is the company's strategy? Are they looking at short, medium, and long-term risks and opportunities? How are they assessing those? So that's where the scenario analysis piece comes in. And then you go into risk management. How are you managing the risks? What are you looking at in terms of the organization's process? So it's both how are you managing it, but also what process do you have in place to incorporate that perhaps into your enterprise risk management? And then metrics and targets. So how are you making progress over time? So as I mentioned, TCFD covers both physical risks, so acute shocks to the system, as well as chronic stresses, climate related, and then the transition risks. So what are the risks for the policy and legal risks associated with transitioning too quickly or transitioning not quickly enough? Are there technologies available? What are they? Are they invested in? Are they up to being able to be deployed and implemented in a way that is just and is effective and efficient? Are there new market risks to transitioning, and then reputational risks? And then opportunities. So there are opportunities with water efficiency, energy efficiency, different energy sources, renewable energies, new products and services that can be developed for a more sustainable and resilient future. New market opportunities, and resilience in general is really driving a lot of this in terms of making sure that we're really leaning towards a more sustainable and resilient future. Once you kind of understand your risks and opportunities, you're able to incorporate those into your strategic planning and your risk management processes and make that fundamental shift. It's hard. It's really hard. You'll hear from some of the speakers today about what that looks like. And it's not a check the box effort. And understanding what the financial impact is also quite a heavy lift. So there's a little bit of background on TCFD. I don't want to take too much time, but TCFD does release an annual status report, and this was the 2020 status report, which was just released in October. And you can find some key findings here. I think we'll be able to share presentations after this call, so I won't go into this in much more detail. But one thing I did want to highlight were some market trends related to TCFD in the broader ESG space, in the corporate space, but also beyond. So we're looking at TCFD disclosures being required by government regulators. So TCFD for cities, we're talking with a lot of different water utilities now who are being asked by investors to disclose their climate-related risks and opportunities. We're seeing an uptick in the need for chief resilience officers, some of which we find in cities. And so now they're going to be integrated into corporations. We are working actually to explore the unintended consequences of TCFD with ASAP. So that looks at, when you're doing a vulnerability assessment and you find that some areas are incredibly vulnerable and are on the front lines of climate change, we don't want companies to just divest and move elsewhere. We want them to help engage the community, make the community a little bit more resilient, and really engage through a more equitable manner. So exploring kind of how things are happening on the ground in terms of climate migration or any other unintended consequences of the TCFD is something we're really interested in. And that will help also to highlight the fact that justice and equity need to be embedded in the whole entire framework of TCFD. So with that, I would love to introduce the panelists today. And I'm going to just pull up my notes. And so first we have Ken Sparkman, one of my favorite people, who serves as the Sustainability and Environmental Compliance Leader at Microsoft. He's also Microsoft's first ever Global Climate Risk and Resilience Lead. Ken will share with us what it takes for a company with a pedigree in sustainable leadership to stay ahead of the curve and how his role is advancing climate leadership.
Hello.
Oh, hold on one second. With over 20 years of corporate experience, Ken is a global business leader, corporate environmentalist, and strategic advisor with a record of success in successfully and skillfully balancing business objectives worldwide with the development of a sustainable organizational culture focused on corporate social responsibility and employee well-being. Ken leverages his poised leadership style, reliable instincts, and change management expertise to navigate businesses and cross-functional teams with large-scale transformation. Ken, it's a pleasure to have you on this panel, and take it away.
Thank you. As Emily mentioned, my name is Ken Sparkman, and of course, I lead sustainability and environmental compliance for Microsoft, an area of sustainability. We do have a chief environmental officer who's awesome, Lucas Japa, and our work reports directly into him. I bring over 20 years of experience in environmental compliance and sustainability, as Emily said, and I've worked across many business sectors, including for the last 13 years, almost 14, in tech specifically. Started at Apple, worked a bit for IBM Cloud, and now here at Microsoft. I've worked across aerospace as well, Honeywell Aerospace, as well as BAE Systems, oil and gas at Chevron, and local government for the city and county of San Francisco. Please, the next slide, please, Beth. We can skip that now as well. That was just my bio. So about climate and sustainability at Microsoft. Microsoft is a poised leader in sustainability. And the way that we work at Microsoft is our sustainability function is broken into 4 strategic pillars: carbon, waste, ecosystems, and water. And this year, we made 4 awesome sustainability sprints that culminated into some major announcements that further established our climate leadership and to challenge the status quo. So in carbon, our announcements were we're aiming to be carbon negative by 2030. We will remove all of the historical carbon emissions created by Microsoft since 1975 by 2050. We also created a $1 billion climate innovation fund to facilitate technological innovations in the carbon removal space, as well as provide funding for seed companies as well as mature companies to be able to further their climate technological agenda and provide solutions for carbon removal. As far as waste goes, we want to achieve zero waste by 2030. We're also investing in new circular centers that part of our data center footprint will ensure the recyclability of certain elements and components of the servers, as well as ensuring that we have the opportunity to reuse some of those components as well, hopefully ending in a 90% uptime for our data centers. So we're looking forward to establishing that further. And we're going to eliminate single-use plastics in packaging by 2025. As far as our ecosystems pillar goes, we want to preserve and protect the biodiversity and health of the world's ecosystems. We're also building a planetary computer, and this computer will facilitate learnings and geospatial data around how we can better protect Earth's ecosystems, as well as house and share that data for academia, public and private industry as well. As related to water, our goal is to be water positive by 2030. We also want to replenish more water than we consume globally by 2030. We want to digitize water data, and by that we mean house it using our Azure platform for academics as well as the public sector to be able to collaborate to figure out how we can solve the water stress issue, as well as enable other companies and people with data to be able to make smart decisions about water. We're going to continue to engage in public policy to increase water access to those that don't have it and availability to those, and improve the quality of that water. And we do want to protect the world's oceans through our water pillar. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of an evolution of the Microsoft's Climate Risk and Resilience Program. Of course, in 2015, this was prior to my arrival, Microsoft explored the materiality of the climate risks that it faces as a business. In 16, there was a preliminary assessment of physical risks and how we disclose. In FY17, they continue to assess the physical and transition risk and opportunities with greater investor interest. In 18, conducted a deeper transition risk assessment using leading scenarios. And I came about in FY19, they hired a dedicated lead for the climate program, and we developed and deployed a climate risk framework. Now, since I've been here, we've launched a climate program and working group that's comprised of key stakeholders around the corporation, as well as the various business groups who actually face climate risk throughout the company. And the president of our company, along with Lucas Joppa, our chief environmental officer, formed a climate council. And this council is basically a council of all the senior leadership around Microsoft. So I think we have the opportunity to make the biggest impact throughout the company based on the constitution of our climate council. We assessed our alignment with TCFD and SASB. Also, we conducted a TCFD aligned scenario analysis of all our physical assets. And we're also planning to continue this work by expanding this to the supply chain, both the supply chains that we have in the corporation. So we're constantly pushing this agenda forward and working throughout the company to ensure that the message and the plan is executed. And then lastly, this year coming up in FY21, we're going to develop an interim climate plan. Well, we've developed the interim plan. We're going to finalize the plan, and we're going to release our first TCFD aligned report. Next slide, please. And lastly, our climate risk and resilience goals. We've worked very hard and come up with some goals that we think will make Microsoft, will continue to make Microsoft a leader in this area, and also set the bar for other tech companies to kind of join, as we've seen the happenings with some of our competitors and also some of our allies. They're taking heed to what we're doing, as well as setting goals and commitments of their own. So we want to assess the adaptive capacity and resilience of our top at-risk locations and further our alignment with TCFD recommendations and the SASB standards by next year, 2021. We want to identify, assess, and integrate equitable climate risk and resilience across our investments, commitments, our operational plans, and preparedness and response systems by 2025. And lastly, we want to equitably minimize our climate-related risk, maximize our climate-related opportunities, and enhance our enterprise, operational, and supply chain resilience by 2030. That's all that I have. Thank you guys for allowing me to present our journey. And of course, if there are any questions, we'll take them during the discussion.
Thank you, Ken. There was one question for you about whether the TCFD risk framework and scenario analysis will be publicly accessible.
We're actually releasing plans and a sustainability report that will be released in January of this year. So please refer to that, and that'll give you an idea of our position currently, as well as the plans that we have to further align by 2022. I think that's the year, right, that we say we would fully align by 2022.
Thanks, Ken. And Mia, we'll get to your next question in the discussion component, because I want to introduce Jamie, who's going to be our next speaker. And Jamie is a Vice President and Senior Project Manager for Corporate Social Responsibility with Northern Trust on the rapid acceleration of climate action that she has driven at Northern Trust over the last 18 months. Jamie serves on the Corporate Social Responsibility Program at Northern Trust. In this role, she is responsible for delivering the annual corporate social responsibility reporting, as well as managing sustainability assessments, including DJSI, CDP, and FTSE for Good. Prior to joining the Corporate Social Responsibility Program, Jamie served as a senior consultant in Northern Trust Enterprise Enablement Product Development. In this role, she was responsible for managing capital-funded change initiatives, complex products, and projects across multiple streams within corporate and institutional services at Northern Trust. Jamie is a 2021 Chicago Urban League Impact Fellow and a current member of the Chicago United Leadership Circle. She serves as a troop leader and service unit registrar for Girl Scouts of Chicago and Northwest Indiana. Jamie received her Certified Corporate Responsibility Executive Certificate from the University of Notre Dame in partnership with the Association of Corporate Citizenship Professionals, ACCP, in March of 2018. Jamie, take it away.
Hello, and thank you, Beth, for my slides for me today. So I thought I would start by giving you all just a little bit of background on Northern Trust. I know that we are not as big as a Microsoft, so I thought maybe you would want to just know a little bit about the Northern Trust if you've never heard of us. See, go to the next slide. So we're a 130-year-old company. We were founded in Chicago in 1889, and our vision is to be the most trusted financial partner, delivering industry-leading capabilities through exceptional people and innovative technology. Go to the next slide. When I started at Northern, I think that we probably, or actually when I started in this role 3.5 to almost 4 years ago, we probably had about 15,000 employees. So even in the past 4 years, you can see how far we've grown. We now have over 25,000 partners. We refer to our employees as partners worldwide. We can be found in 25 global locations. We have clients in 53 different countries, and we're in 102 markets around the world. Next slide, please. We're committed to our core values. If you ever just visit northerntrust.com, everywhere you'll see across the website talking about service integrity and expertise. We believe in delivering exceptional service to our clients, deploying our knowledge and capabilities, and acting with the highest ethics, utmost honesty, and unfailing reliability. And then we have a very focused business model. So at Northern Trust, our three main business areas are our asset servicing business, our wealth management, and our asset management business. Our asset management assets under custody, as you can see, are a little over 13 trillion. Assets under custody, a little over 10 trillion. Assets under management have grown to 1.3 trillion. And again, we've already talked about us being in 25 locations. Thank you. So a little bit about sustainability highlights while we're really here today. So we currently have 106 billion in assets under management in sustainable investing strategies, and that is as of September 30th of 2020. We've been in the sustainable investing practice for a little over 30 years. probably 20 years ago, 10 years ago, people would often refer to it as the socially responsible investing practice. But around 2018, we changed that to sustainable investing to align more with industry standards. If you're looking at us recently, I think 2 weeks ago or about a week ago, we found out that we, for the first time, made the CDP A list. And earlier this year, we received an A+ in our Principles for Responsible Investing report. So I think Emily may have mentioned some of these different assessments that we submit to every year. And so this 2020, although it's been a crazy year, it's been a good year for us when it comes to some of our sustainability initiatives. And then my last slide. So I know this might be a little hard to see. I don't know if we should blow it up, but why we're here today. So how did we get here? So again, we've been in, thank you. We've been in sustainable investing for over 30 years, but we started probably making this practice across the entire bank in 2018, a little after the financial crisis. We started realizing that we needed to be more intentional about letting our investors, our clients, different stakeholders know what the type of things that we do and that we do believe in here at Northern Trust. So in 2008, we had launched our first employee engagement for back then on environmental issues, and it was called Partners Think Green. By then, we had already submitted our first CDP, and we had already launched our sustainable investing practice. Then we moved into joining the Principles for Responsible Investing in 2009. And by 2010, we released our first corporate social responsibility report, where we first started to speak about reducing our carbon emissions, setting some goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the corporation. In 2015, we finally moved into a place of having some oversight. So we originally had a corporate social responsibility committee of the board of directors. Since then, in the past 3 years, we now report into the corporate governance committee as things shifted from more ESG or being called environmental or only focused on our carbon emissions. Once we started looking at the risk of climate risk and opportunities, we started reporting into our corporate governance committee, assumed oversight of those responsibilities. So 2018 is probably where things started to shift for us. And as we talk about the last 18 months, in 2018, we start to see companies submitting to the TCFD. And even though we were aware of the TCFD, we had been staying up to date on what was happening. We just really weren't in a place back then where we were ready to do the work that we needed to do to really look at how climate risk would impact Northern Trust. However, we decided we would release our first sustainable investing philosophy so that at least our stakeholders had some sort of insight into how the actions that we wanted to take on climate change, how we stood on diverse issues when it came to our investing practices. In 2019, we decided to actually opt out of doing the CDP because we realized at that point that we did want to focus. We were starting to get lots of questions from investors. I receive a lot of requests for proposals for prospective clients, existing clients, due diligence requests. And in 2019, everyone wanted to know what we were doing around climate risk. So we opted out of the CDP that year because we're a small organization, but even smaller team. And so we wanted to focus on actually starting the stress testing and doing some scenario analysis so that we can have a better understanding of how climate was going to impact the corporation in the next 20, 30, 40 years. We worked with our partners in operational risk. We worked with some people in our treasury group to get the information we needed, and we started looking at our locations around the globe. From that, we found out what our top 10 locations were. We looked at what the top risks were going to be to those locations, and we have started using that information in our different tabletops and stress testing exercises. This year in 2020 was the first year we released our first statement of climate risk and opportunities report that is aligned to the TCFD. In that, you will see some of the analysis, and of course, we had to release ours at a very, very high level, being as though it was the first one. You also will see in our 2019 10K filing that came out early this year. It was the first time that we'd ever talked about climate change in our 10K filing or our annual report. We are actually in the process now of refreshing that information for the current 10K filing that we'll have to submit early next year. So we will have even more climate conversations in our annual report going forward. We're also currently in the process of assessing our assets, the assets that we manage on behalf of our clients, the assets we have on our balance sheet, for the risk that climate change will have on those assets. And we're working with our asset servicing team to determine how they can provide a service that assesses the risk of their clients, the risk that climate will have on other asset managers that we provide asset servicing responsibilities for. So as we look forward, the things that we're thinking that we will be doing in 2021, we really are looking to really incorporate the findings of the scenario analysis to our enterprise risk management process. We haven't really determined where the home will be for climate. Right now, we're very segmented around risk. Risk has a portion, corporate social responsibility has a portion of it, and then our different business units have their own responsibility, but we're still in the process of determining who will completely own it at the enterprise level. Where will climate change roll up to across the board? You'll also find that, and you see our most recent capital assumptions report, we've started to report this information out as a risk that we want all of our, climate is one of our 6 risks that we want our clients and investors to be on the lookout for over the next few years. The first time we put it in our capital assumptions report was last year, and we put it in our report this year, and I don't think it will go away anytime soon. So that is just a high level, I guess, of where we are right now at Northern Trust. And I look forward to any questions we have later on.
Great, thank you, Jamie, so much. There were a couple questions that came in for you, and maybe you can take one of them at this time. One of them relates to how does Northern Trust actively embrace ESG as a form of cultural progress rather than a compliance exercise?
Okay, cultural progress. So I will say, if we're looking at the E of ESG, so we have inside the corporation, we have what we call, it was formerly called the Partners Think Green, but now we call it Sustainability Network. We actually, even in this time of everyone working from home in the pandemic, we probably are getting more interest from our employees or partners on what they can do to have an impact on climate. It's because it's one of the things that we're starting to see more in the news now. But if you walk through Northern Trust, we do promote our carbon emissions. We do report. We do publicly discuss climate change inside the bank. We have our own internal webinars, and our partners are interested in. And sometimes we actually will have webinars that we'll have a guest speaker or outside speakers come in and provide it. Usually about 4 times a year, they provide this type of information to our clients. To our employees, excuse me. If you're thinking about the S, I think Northern Trust is probably, again, in the financial services industry, probably one of the leading banks when it comes to social issues right now, especially social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have, in the past few years, finally, after, I know it's a 130-year-old bank, but we are probably one of the few people that can say that we have at least 3 people of color on our management group. We have a very diverse, gender diverse group. Our board is probably one of the few banks around in the United States that have more than 2 people of color on it, have more than 1 woman on it. So I think ESG has been embedded in our culture of the service integrity and expertise. It just shows up in lots of different ways.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, no, that was great. All right, so we're going to move on to our third speaker, who is Chris Canto from American Family, and he'll be sharing how AmFam is considering their role in climate action and community resilience. Chris Canto is a senior risk analyst at American Family Insurance. In this role, Chris manages technology-related risks in addition to climate-related risks. Prior to his role as a risk analyst, Chris led the development of AmFam's sustainability and climate action strategy plan, which is available publicly. Chris holds a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources and Landscape Architecture and a Master of Science in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Wisconsin. Chris is motivated by challenging institutional barriers so that public and private sectors together can work towards systems change and sustainable community development. Chris, welcome to the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. And first off, just wanted to thank WSP, Microsoft, and the American Society of Adaptation Professionals for this opportunity. I think it's truly a pleasure and an honor to be joining such a great group of panelists, and I'm personally looking forward to the discussion following the presentations. So today I'd like to just share out on our journey at American Family Insurance, from sustainability to discussions in climate risk and TCFD, as well as some general thoughts on the role insurance can play in climate risk and resilience. So just a couple, three key takeaways. At American Family Insurance, we've definitely evolved from our foundations in environmental sustainability to corporate responsibility, and now moving much more towards corporate advocacy and community resilience. I think public-private partnerships and strategic relationships are really critical to the success of this work. And then finally, I do believe that the insurance industry can be a leader in climate risk, and especially when we think about putting our customers and their communities at the center of these conversations and thinking about adaptation, finance, and investment. Similar to Jamie, just want to give a really high level overview of American Family Insurance. So the American Family Insurance enterprise is just over 91 years old. We're based out of Madison, Wisconsin. And we're a privately owned mutual insurance company, and we specialize in property, casualty, and auto insurance. We have just over 13,000 employees, and when you look at our operating companies here on the screen, we're represented across the country other than Alaska and Hawaii. I wanted to start with what's influencing our action at American Family Insurance, as an insurance company. So I think our why, when we really think about that inner ring, begins with customers and their communities. Our brand is a promise to inspire, protect, and restore dreams, and I think that rings true when we think about climate risk and our customers and their communities. So we're really interested in the actions that promote proactive protection for our customers and enhance the overall resilience of their communities. So that way they can continue to dream today and tomorrow. I think when you work your way out from there, certainly we know that catastrophic events are increasing, and there is also an opportunity to enhance our overall strategic business resilience. And then finally, I think, as Emily alluded to at the beginning in the introduction, there certainly is some increasing regulatory discussions, mandated disclosures. So collectively, when we think about our why at American Family Insurance and why climate risk and resilience is important to us, certainly everything begins with the customers and communities in mind. And we feel that by focusing on them, they'll ultimately enhance our enterprise strategic resilience and put us in a position to address any future regulatory questions. Emily also alluded to this briefly in the introduction, but I just wanted to show this graphic here. So on the right is the number of billion-dollar disasters and the associated costs. So in the orange, you can see costs have been going up for disaster events, and the events themselves have been going up. And there's some pretty amazing facts related to this. So 4 of the 5 most costly US billion-dollar disasters have occurred in the 2010s alone, with 2 of the most destructive and costly wildfire seasons in US history taking place over the last 3 years. And then just focusing on 2020 alone, the first 9 months of 2020 ties the annual record with number of billion-dollar disasters at 16. So that's occurred in 2011 and 2017 and now in 2020. But maybe even more important is that 2020 is the 6th consecutive year with 10 or more billion-dollar disasters. So 2015, 2016, 17, all the way through 2020, we've experienced 10 or more billion-dollar weather-related disasters. And then also just wanted to highlight, often I think the coasts get a lot of the attention when it comes to catastrophic events. But we did experience a really significant Midwest derecho across the Midwest that went unnoticed for many, but was super powerful and really devastated the Midwest, in particular Iowa, many of the corn crops in Iowa and Cedar Rapids. And NOAA estimated the damage of that one particular event at $7.5 billion. So certainly the events are increasing both in frequency, but also the cost from an impact standpoint. So our journey at American Family Insurance really began with sustainability from an environmental sustainability standpoint, probably around 2007, where we started to focus on land, waste, water, and energy. We have since installed a pretty massive solar array on our rooftop at our headquarters in Madison with just over 4,000 solar panels. We have a pretty significant effort to be a zero waste organization and reduce waste. We do run it's called the Steve Stricker American Family Championship, a golf tournament. And just over the last 2 years, that has been a zero waste event that we're quite proud of. And we also have a pretty extensive land management strategy for our headquarters and campus, including prairie restorations. I would say that then, sustainability evolved into, a much broader focus on corporate responsibility and working with our partners in community investments from a philanthropic standpoint, and then also working with others across the organization, including human resources, from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, to really kind of create this full encompassing perspective of corporate responsibility. Since that time, we've also launched the American Family Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. So moving to item number 3, which is a venture capital firm and partner of choice for exceptional entrepreneurs who are building scalable and sustainable businesses. So the American Family Institute for Corporate and Social Impact has 4 different focus areas. The first being economic opportunity, the second being healthy youth development, the third being learning and academic achievement, and then finally, the one most connected to climate risk is resilient communities. So that resilient communities focus area has made investments in companies that are focused in energy and water technologies. A couple of the names that are notable are Block Power, BioBot, and then Storm Sensor. So the American Family Institute is doing some really great work from a social impact standpoint. We've also recently started engaging in corporate advocacy and public policy work. We supported the Wisconsin Governor's Task Force on Climate Change and developing recommendations for the state of Wisconsin, and are eager for similar opportunities in that space. And then finally, as we get to climate risk, TCFD has really been integral in shaping our approach. And as Emily mentioned, really connecting folks across our enterprise to have this discussion on climate risk and the financial stability of our enterprise, but also broader community resilience for our customers. So while at this point in our journey, we are not reporting out on TCFD, we have very much embraced TCFD as that foundational framework. And it has really allowed us to have those conversations that we may have not otherwise had. Also just wanted to mention the increasing awareness of climate-related financial risk from an insurance standpoint and financial stability standpoint globally, with the UK and New Zealand leading in mandatory disclosures. Nationally, the US Commodity Futures Trading Commission has released some reports noting the importance of climate risk and the stability to the US financial system. The Federal Reserve, I just saw today, officially joined the Network for Greening the Financial Systems. And then at a state level, specific to insurance, the New York Department of Financial Services has released expectations for the insurance industry to begin discussing and managing financial risk from climate change. And then finally, from an industry standpoint, industry is also having these conversations with a recent announcement of some guiding principles for the American Property and Casualty Insurance Association. So needless to say, I think there's increasing awareness on this topic and interest on this topic. And so from my perspective, I think there's certainly some opportunity for the insurance industry to lead in climate action and specifically climate risk. And I have these 5 opportunities listed here. And really for us, this is just the beginning and for future discussions. And so I frame these more so as questions and conversations that we're having in real time as an organization. So for example, how might the insurance industry and insurers utilize climate change models to enhance our accuracy and precision of short-term weather and catastrophic models? Similarly, how might we utilize climate risk assessments and scenario analysis to have longer-term strategic decisions when it comes to underwriting? How can we engage customers and educate on their own personal resilience when you think about managing your home around forests, for example, from a wildfire safety standpoint? And then how can we engage in public and private partnerships for broader regional and community resilience? So again, using wildfires as an example, thinking about forest management or flooding, thinking about regional green infrastructure opportunities. And then finally, just thinking how we can partner with industry and regulators on these discussions regarding climate risk. All right, and so with that, that's the end of my slides, and I have my email here and links for those who are interested in more information about American Family.
Thank you, Chris. It's so great to see all the activity that's going on, and I know that you guys are privately held, so a lot of this is really driven by the company. And as a lot of the participants may know, we do have a personal resilience group. And so seeing that dedication to personal resilience is wonderful to see.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're at a time where we're going to have a little bit of reflection and discussion from Paul Mundy. And he's with S&P Global Ratings. And hopefully we'll be able to gain some inspiration on how innovation and leadership in the corporate sector is critical for transformative global change. Dr. Paul Mundy, Associate Director, Climate Adaptation and Resilience at S&P Global Ratings. He leads research and the application of climate risk analytics, helping to improve the clarity of the credit impacts of climate risks. Paul has over 10 years of experience in both the UK and abroad, providing advice to private and public sector clients across multiple sectors, including infrastructure, water, and the environment, to help mainstream considerations of climate resilience into projects and programs. Prior to joining S&P Global Ratings, Paul worked in the environmental consultancy, leading WSP's UK climate resilience team. We do miss him here at WSP, but we know he's in a good place with S&P Global Ratings. Paul is a chartered scientist, chartered water and environment manager, and certified expert in climate adaptation finance by the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. Paul, would love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks very much, Emily, and thanks to all the speakers. There's a lot to chew over there. So I thought in the first instance, it would make sense just to run through some key takeaways, those that certainly stuck out for me. So in the first instance, Ken from Microsoft. So Ken described Microsoft's climate leadership and its commitments, which focus on carbon, waste, ecosystems, and water. And the company's carbon negative and zero waste targets by 2030 really stood out, but also its ambitions to think beyond the factory gate. So specifically the company's commitments to protect land outside of its ownership boundary and in protecting ecosystems. And of course, we're all aware that there is ample evidence to suggest that both nature and ecosystem-based adaptation are key to building resilience at scale. Ken also described Microsoft's climate risk and resilience journey, starting in 2015 with a focus on materiality to assessing transition and physical risks in 2017, and a focus going forward on developing its climate plan and TCFD report in 2021. And then going to Northern Trust and Jamie. So in Jamie's talk, she walked us through Northern Trust's path of accelerated climate leadership. She explained how the Trust now views climate change as central to its business strategy and how it is working towards the integration of scenario analysis into the firm's enterprise risk management process. And then lastly, we heard from Chris from American Family. So Chris described the company's journey and how the focus has shifted from sustainability and corporate responsibility to corporate advocacy and a focus on communities. And Chris also described the importance of collaboration and emphasized the value of strategic relationships to build resilience and success, whilst also highlighting that community resilience and corporate resilience are intrinsically linked. So that was just a bit of an overview of some of the kind of key takeaways, certainly in my mind. I'm sure you've each got your own as well. But I also had three kind of main observations as well, perhaps some points for discussion. So the first one is that better data is good, but not at the expense of better decision making. So we're all aware of the vast number of tools and indeed data sets that are available to help companies benchmark themselves and the impacts associated with physical and transition risks, and also to identify any possible unmitigated future exposures. However, just as important as the use of good data in risk assessments is the role of decision making in managing climate risks. And of course, it goes without saying that for large companies, this is a particular challenge. Different divisions may be impacted in very different ways, yet the risks are often shared across the company and responses sometimes uncoordinated. And this is also kind of doubly so for companies with complex supply chains as well. And as the metrics improve for monitoring progress against action plans, as well as the quantity and the quality of disclosures, might we expect to see better decision making? The second observation that I had was the emphasis that the speakers placed upon the importance of fostering collaboration within their organisations and throughout their value chains, including their stakeholders, particularly key stakeholders such as communities. So, of course, developing buy-in can be a challenge, but strategic relationships, both internal and external, are likely to be critical to plan success. And many commentators have argued that there is often a material gap between climate leadership and community impact, whilst it's usually communities that first feel the impacts, but crucially are also the first to feel the benefits of such actions as well. Therefore, it's also been further argued that decision-making beyond the factory gate, and that's a term that I used a little bit earlier, is central to building societal resilience, which is a concept that is often challenging for many companies, more so against the backdrop of uncertainty that we get through data, through climate projections, and through our decision-making processes more generally, that often shrouds our decision-making, where a boundary puts a hard stop on any decision. Lastly, it's fair to say that the insurance industry has a role to play here too. It has collected a wealth of data and experience in assessing evolving risks, including those related to climate change, and in educating stakeholders. On insurance, though, is there also a risk in relying on insurance as our resilience backstop? The third observation and final observation is that the speakers described their different journeys, and it was clear to me that companies are maturing relatively quickly. As organisations transcend the TCFD maturity curve, emphasis is shifting from risk assessment towards adaptive capacity, and that is the ability of organisations to manage and deal with the disruptions associated with climate change. Needless to say, COVID-19 has certainly helped accelerate this focus. Understanding adaptive capacity is more important than ever, more so how companies deal with and adapt to known unknowns, including green swan events. Scenario analysis, central to the TCFD's recommended disclosures, is a tool for testing companies' organisational resilience. And while scenario analysis is not new for many companies or indeed sectors, the TCFD has stated that this is an area where it expects to see future growth, both in terms of the numbers of disclosure, but also the quality as well. In addition, some commentators have argued that a focus on adaptive capacity might represent a shift in perspective from thinking about risk to opportunity assessment, allowing organisations to pivot their strategies and plans quickly to take advantage of any opportunities. So, to try and finish on a positive note, perhaps therefore a different lens might be a good thing. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I think a lot of our panelists can probably relate to the adaptive capacity piece, as well as, will the findings from their scenario analysis lead to better decision making? And then the piece about connecting with community resilience and societal resilience is so crucial as corporations do start to look outside of their company walls. So we're going to take a couple of questions that we had teed up for the panelists first, and then we're going to go out to some of the questions that some of the participants have posed. So in terms of collaboration and the value of collaboration. I'm wondering if each of the panelists can speak to how you're collaborating within your industries, within your sectors, and what kind of barriers exist or challenges and opportunities that you can speak to. And if you can put your videos back on, that would be great. And anyone can take a first stab at it.
Yeah, Emily, I can jump in on that one regarding collaboration, speaking specifically to the insurance industry. As I mentioned, I think there's a growing interest on this topic from insurers, and recent developments of kind of informal networks of insurers having these conversations on how the insurance industry can address the topic of climate risk, how we can increase adaptive capacity of our communities, and also thinking about kind of adaptation finance. I think that one of the challenges in that, though, specific to insurance, is that it's a highly regulated industry, and depending on the state, comes with all sorts of different regulatory requirements and different folks to work with. So I think what's important to keep in mind on that topic is certainly one size may not fit all, depending on the insurer or depending on the location that you're operating in. And it may be different for each insurer depending on the state you are and the actions that you're planning to take.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that one size doesn't fit all, and that's very true in the adaptation space. Ken and Jamie, do you guys want to share your thoughts?
After you, Jamie.
Oh, okay. So when it comes to collaboration, actually, in the past probably few weeks, we've actually been working with one of our peers in the industry to really look at how we're going to start using a system to assess climate risk and opportunities of our portfolio, which is one of the first times I think we've ever partnered with this firm, and more will come once we sign an agreement. But I think this is a year that we have determined that we definitely need to start collaborating with more, because it's similar to what Chris said. We are also in a very highly regulated industry, so things don't move, and sometimes we can move in one direction, but also we have so many other things that we have to report and have to do from a regulatory standpoint, whether it be at the state level or the federal level. And then as you're a global organization like we are, we have to also take into consideration different regulatory requirements across the globe. Things do tend to move slow, but when we can start collaborating on maybe technology and systems to use things, I think we'll start to move in the right direction in the next few years.
Well, as far as Microsoft goes, I think being in a unique position as being, one of the top companies in the world, opportunities for collaboration come quite a bit. It's just the pressure and the difficulty is weeding out ones that will be effective for our overall goal and programs, as well as ones that we can enable to facilitate their mission as well as it relates to sustainability and climate risk. So no issue in the partnership side. I think the more issue within, it's more internal, because Microsoft is such a behemoth organization that finding the right people to be able to affect change in a way that we need to, by the time we need to affect it, I think is the main challenge for me. But I think, external, we have a customers and partners director. So, and I imagine that her inbox is pretty full as well, with opportunities to collaborate across many technological platforms, as well as, joining coalitions. I think Paul, the water program manager on my team, has founded a coalition with 16 other companies. So I think being a lighthouse company such as Microsoft is, it enables us the ability to kind of, see across many technological industries and barriers, and form partnerships that we know will ultimately yield fruit. So the challenge more so is weeding out those potential partners and those potential collaborations that will be of the most benefit, I think.
Great. Yeah, and Ken, I know you guys have the Climate Innovation Fund, which is really meant to spur innovation in the technology industry, to really
Exactly.
further accelerate the transition to a
Absolutely.
clean.
And we invest in technologies, seed technologies, as well as late stage companies, even, financial venture funds. It's a myriad of investees or climate fund participants that we, want to ensure that we're facilitating not only from the financial side, but the technological side as well.
Great, thanks, Ken. So moving outside of your sectors and industries, can you talk a little bit about how your companies have been involved in kind of community resilience or community engagement to enhance the adaptive capacity of the local communities or host communities?
I'll go first on that one.
Great.
Our data center team has communities, basically like a program that's run by a few people, and we find in areas that we operate ways to enhance, for instance, water. We know that our data centers in certain locations have water stress issues, so our water program manager focuses with the data center communities team to do water replenishment projects. So to try to facilitate resilience in that way to ensure that the community always has access to water. And we particularly focus on those basins that have stress. And so with that, we partner throughout, the data center team, even with waste and the other pillars that we operate in our sustainability team. We always try to find ways to partner with the local communities to enhance their resilience, as well as kind of be that good corporate citizen of enhancing those communities that we operate and serve.
Great, thanks, Ken. Jamie or Chris?
I think I would say this is still a challenge for us because, again, as the type of bank that we are, we have, again, regulatory requirements around community reinvestments and community developments. And so there's a percentage of our balance sheet that we are just required to make investments in our communities. But we also, when you're trying to invest in communities, you're trying to, we like to focus on job creation, we focus on education, we focus on social services, and our fourth pillar is wealth accumulation. And when you're trying to create or focus on creating jobs, is real. Sometimes it could be a challenge to say, well, if we're trying to focus on a particular a low income community or a community that needs our support, what will the impact of climate be in those same communities if we were to divest from certain industries on one side of our balance sheet, but also we're investing in that same thing because we want those communities to have jobs. So we're in a real challenge of making sure that we're providing the things that the community may need, but also making sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't harm them at the same time. So that's one of the things that we're still in a place of trying to figure out. How do we make sure that we're giving them what they need, but also not doing additional harm?
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to the just transition component. And how does that, how do you support the folks that may be in an industry that is more carbon heavy and needs to transition to renewable energy training or jobs, and what does that look like? And Chris, I think you guys can relate to that through the institute that you guys have as well.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. I was going to say, I think the best example for us at American Family Insurance is the great work that the American Family Institute for Corporate and Social Impact is doing in terms of investing in early stage startups. Again, whether it be in energy or stormwater management and green infrastructure technologies. Kind of similar to Jamie-ish, I think we certainly recognize an opportunity in different forms of community adaptation and investments, but are still exploring what those opportunities are and the best way to engage with those and partner with those areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when it comes to diversity and equity and inclusion and justice, how are you working to integrate that into the work that you're doing on climate action, and what does that look like for your company, but also for your customers and your clients?
At Microsoft, I think we started off by our chief environmental officer mandating that each of the program leads on his team weave diversity and inclusion and climate equity and justice into our programs. And I think you and I took a special moment to make sure that we included that in ours. And I think it has to start, there at the beginning or I guess the top of the program, to kind of just make sure that we weave those factors into our program, and also like specifically how we're going to do it with step-by-step goals and targets around that, and holding us accountable to it. So that I think, we just kind of gotten into this push in the middle of this year. So I'm very excited to see what the fruit will be from each of our programs as we, mature them and continue to operate them.
And Northern Trust, corporate social responsibility is and diversity, equity, inclusion are all led by the same. I report to the head of corporate social responsibility and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've merged those two groups together maybe about 8 years ago. We also, our community development and investments also falls under corporate social responsibility. So we know that those things are important to our various stakeholders. One of the things that we are currently in the process of doing is looking at what we currently call our supplier diversity program, and trying to look beyond just these small business owners or the minority business owners, but also looking at the corporations and like a Northern Trust or a Microsoft, and looking at the diversity of those people. Because again, we're only going to be able to invest so much or use so many small businesses or minority-owned businesses in our supply chain. But we also want to make sure that if we are using a Microsoft or an Oracle or whatever the company is, that they have a diverse team of people that are supporting us. And so as we are starting to look at that, we met recently to say, okay, if we're about to go back out and start getting the diversity stats of all of our maybe top tier 1 or 2 tier suppliers, we also need them to provide us either their CSR report or their greenhouse gas emissions or carbon emissions reports as well, so that we can, if we're assessing all of that, let's also add climate in at the same time as we go out. So that's one of the initiatives that we're looking to start, and we started this year, but we'll continue that into 2021.
Great, it'll be interesting to see what you get back, Jamie. Chris?
Yeah, and I'll just add maybe a little bit different perspective is, in thinking about environmental justice, climate justice, and what role we might have and how it intersects with climate risk at American Family Insurance. I think one thing to consider is what are those institutional and systemic structures that have caused those injustices to come about, and what role as a corporate entity we have in kind of advocating on any one particular item that might be able to change those systems. And so I think it's really thinking about what are some of those root causes that have caused those, and what particular action we might advocate for that could make things a little bit better.
Yeah, and I know that you guys within AmFam have been really intentional about how you're defining environmental justice and climate justice, so that everyone's kind of on the same page, and instead of just kind of throwing the words around, which can be an issue, you're really being intentional about how do you define it, and then truly how do you make that systemic change.
Right, and I think engaging communities in the definition of what it means is super important as well. And so I think that from our standpoint is what we're exploring, and how we go about that work in a way that we're not divining what environmental justice is for any one particular community, but working with those communities to come to a collective understanding of what it means to them.
Yeah, great. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Beth to field a couple of participant questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. And thank you for the discussion that's been happening here already. I know that there's been a lot of questions coming in the chat, so I'm going to pull out a couple. If any of you see something that's come up in the chat or come up in the Q&A that you want to pull out, feel free to do that. But let's start with a discussion around, I'm going to take regionalism at a few different scales. So first, there's a question which was posed where we said, how are local and regional policies factored into your risk assessment? And I'd love to hear whoever wants to take that first. I think it kind of builds on this conversation too. Obviously, all the companies are located in places, and the policies that we all live under influence how we can do what we want to do. So let's start there. I'm going to try to put these questions in the chat as we go.
Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about the adaptive capacity piece that we're doing with the data centers?
Sure. So we did a TCFD aligned scenario analysis of the physical risks or the top 400 assets. We did the physical risk, the transition risk opportunities as well, to understand like where our top risks were in the financial impact to those particular facilities. And so the risk analysis that we performed was mainly centered around risk at a worst case scenario. And so it did not account for adaptive capacity and resilience. And so what we've done is we've planned and so far executed half of the top 20 at-risk sites, performing site visits, going to these data centers. And because of COVID, as you can imagine, we've experienced quite a bit of challenges, but my thought and my attitude towards the program was, we're Microsoft, we're a technology company, surely we can overcome, having to be there in person. And sure enough, everybody bought into it and we were able to make good progress, but we're going to take to understand what the adaptive capacity is at those sites. And then I think, the way that we're approaching it, there aren't very many, I guess, regulations around how we're doing it. It's because it's TCFD aligned and no one has adopted and made these standards, required. I think, we're taking the position that at some point they will become a requirement, that we're hoping that they become a requirement. And so with that, we're better served at understanding kind of where we are in that whole paradigm. But getting back to the risk analysis, because they don't include adaptive capacity, we're going out to understand what's in the communities, what we're doing at Microsoft, because we have a data center innovations team and they come up with all these awesome energy efficiency programs and ways to operate our data center, as well as some proprietary things that they're doing to also enhance our sustainability. But we're taking a stock of the adaptive capacity and resilience of the community. And what we're doing now is we're formulating how we calculate that and put a financial value to that. And so we're working with a group that has a tool, and also we're working internally to come up with a methodology that will display that succinctly. And so when we do that, we'll be able to
I had a feeling we were
adapt.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
We're losing you a little bit, Ken.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think we got a lot of it. I just want to know, does anybody else want to jump in on this question of how local and regional policy gets factored in to your assessments?
I was just going to say that similar to what Kim was saying, there's not a lot of regulation right now on what we have to do, but our clients still want something different. So there's been a lot of discussion this year about should ESG be an option for pension plans, and the current administration would say that's too risky. We disagree that you should have ESG in your pension plans, but our clients don't necessarily agree with that, and so we have to take that into consideration. There's no regulation that's saying that we can't do it, but the regulation is not on our side to really necessarily allow us to do it. So I think you will see in the future that we are taking the stance that we are not trying to do harm to our clients, but if we actually if this sustainability is what we want it to be, if climate risk is the risk that we say that it is, if this is what we're telling people to factor into their investments, then we should also be able to take that into consideration in our clients' pension plans if that's the way, if that's the route that they want to go, and if that's what's going to be best for them in the future.
Yeah, and I just want to say from my own perspective, you know, I've now had the opportunity to spend about 3.5 or 4 hours with this group, with all of you, and I've found it so inspiring to hear where this leadership is coming from, because often our conversations are really about what is happening in the public sector. And in the US, it's moved pretty slowly. And so to hear that the companies are taking this on, taking a leadership position, and really embracing that position that if you want to be a leader, you have to lead. It's inspired me, and it's really given me hope on where we're going in the field. And so, Emily, back to you, because I love this question because I love Emily Wasley. So maybe you can ask everybody else the same thing.
Sure thing. Nice tee up, Beth. So, you know, our last question is, and as we wrap up a very tumultuous 2020, what gives you hope for the future? Given what you do, given what your role is in your company, what are some signs of hope?
For me, it's been like the actual humanization of corporate America. Like now we can see everybody's background at home, even when you put the blur up on Zoom, what have you, it just gives you an idea of the humanity of people. And, you know, I think that's very hopeful for me. You know, think that taking a personal approach to work has just been something that's been very eye-opening, as well as soothing to the soul. So that's the thing that gives me hope, is that we're able to persevere through this pandemic, as well as get a glimpse of how personal people are and the humanity of things.
Can I add and say something that I think that, you know, one thing that COVID has taught us, that you know, there are clearly tangents to the climate emergency here, in the sense that, you know, this is a global scale risk, you know, that is geography and community agnostic. You know, we've been able to pull together collaboratively, you know, I think as as communities, as companies, as colleagues, and delivered that at scale, which I think is incredibly impressive. I don't think we'd have had these same conversations a year or so ago. It's a very different world now. And just lastly, you know, therefore our kind of ability to quickly adapt and change our behaviours, you know, we've proved that we can do it. So I think that's a real positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll maybe jump in with I think the younger generation and their unwavering desire to hold us accountable, and kind of continued push to act on this topic in particular, among others. But I think that gives me hope that, you know, we can continue to do the work that we're doing, but knowing that there's an entire generation behind us that not only is pushing us to do better, but also looking forward to kind of picking up the reins and leading that forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just maybe say the diversity of the people that are involved. I personally have not been involved in such a diverse climate related conversation, to be honest. And I just think that even from age, from gender to our ethnicity and race, this has been an awesome experience for me, just to sit and talk with you all over the past few weeks. And I think I've seen it a lot more than I ever have as long as I've been in this space. The past 4 years, I feel like this year has been a year of realizing all of those of us that are behind the scenes doing this work, and that the backgrounds of us are much more diverse than people may have ever thought. So.
Agreed. And before I turn it back to Beth, I just want to thank you all so much for your time and your energy and your dedicated service to climate action. You absolutely inspire me, each one of you. And I so appreciate just hearing your stories and your journeys. So thank you. And Beth, back over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Paul, Christopher, Ken, and Jamie, for being here, for sharing your perspectives, for sharing your work and your journey. I have found it really inspiring, as I said, and I'm sure the folks who have joined us have as well. I'm going to take us out with a few outro slides here. I want to remind folks that they can keep tuning in to our co-creation webinar series. Our next installment will take place in February of 2021. The topic is going to be bridging the partisan divide with resilient solutions, co-hosted with Neemac Fernleaf and other speakers to be coming on board. And then in April 2021, we're scheduled to have our 6th installment, and we're actively recruiting presenters and speakers. So if you're interested in being part of the presentation team that puts on these webinars, please feel free to contact me. Just a little bit on ASAP again. When you join ASAP, you get access to all of our resources, our network, the professionals who are tackling climate change every day, just like you are. Individual memberships begin at $150, and we build customized sponsorship and organizational packages, which begin at $1,500. However, at ASAP, we do believe that this is not work that should be bound by a fee or a dollar amount. So we're always open to have conversations to build programs that match wherever you are so that you can be part of the sharing and learning that we're doing together. I just want to thank everyone for being here once again. Feel free to reach out to me at any time or learn more about ASAP on our website at adaptationprofessionals.org. And thank you to our presenters, and I wish you all a wonderful conclusion to 2020, and I hope that you're looking forward to a vibrant 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thanks,
all.
Beth. Thanks.
Take care.
Happy holidays.